always, we will start with introductions. Introductions only need to happen for the board members, administrators, and staff, so there's no need for folks in the audience to introduce themselves. Although we appreciate you being here, you know, so here. So with that, Peter?
Peter Rose, Superintendent.
Mary Cullinane?
Mary Gill.
Lori Moore?
Victoria Getty.
Mary Heather Noble, Nargis Gonzalez,
Barbara Wilson.
Lindsay Heskott,
Amy McGlashan.
Jack Newsier,
Jim Malcolm.
Will Hatch, Technology Director.
Suzanne?
Suzanne Bach.
Staff here, please.
Logan Price, Business Manager.
Caitlin Steele, Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning, Nicole Shredder, Director Equity and Student Services.
Super. Thank you all very much. As always, we would like to take this opportunity to ask for and receive any public comment. Prior to doing that, however, Will, could you also read off the attendees that are online?
Sure. Amy Mason, Bobby Loney, Caitlin Gildrian, Joanna Cowell, Julie Altimos, Carrie, MCTV, Ann Sunderland, Nancy Crawford, Nancy Woolham, Rebecca Strum, Tara Walter.
Great, thank you. So at this time, we would, as always, like to take the opportunity to have public comment. If you are online and you have public comment, we ask that you raise your Zoom hand. We will take a public comment for those who are in the room here first. And then we'll see if there's anybody online who has public comment. So at this time, if you wish to speak, please raise your hand and introduce yourself. Yes, sir.
My name is Steve Warzek.
Hi, Steve.
Thank you for your attention. Many of you know me from my time I served on the board. You also know that I'm a retired teacher. Among the subjects I taught during my time in the classroom was personal finance. Although I taught discrete skills, I found that students learned more about how the world of money works by seeing how many of the factors in life come together to form a whole that is much more complex than its parts. To illustrate, using a brief example, I had a student in my class who participated in my simulation of an adult financial world. She had her heart set in real life on attending Brown University, not only attend, but receive a master's degree. She also wanted to become an elementary school teacher of math. All three of those things were great and admirable goals, and I wanted to encourage her to pursue them all. But I think you can guess what happened when it came time to pay for the student loans for 6 years at Brown with an elementary teacher's salary. I believe that a similar situation is happening at the middle school. The goal of becoming an IB school that so many have worked to make a reality is an admirable goal, and one that I supported when I was on the board. The goal of moving the district's 6th grade classes to middle school to align our district with the IB curriculum is an admirable goal. The goal of reorganizing the team structure at the middle school to align faculty with the new and increased student population is an admirable goal. The goal of providing a normal school year to students battered by the COVID pandemic is an admirable goal. But I think you can guess what is happening right now at the middle school. Furthermore, every single student at the school has never had a normal middle school experience. Instead of transitioning 100 or so students from elementary to middle school norms, the faculty and staff faces this further compounding of the above synergistic challenge. Student behavior alone is overwhelming the administration and faculty. Although 80 to 90% of the students are wonderful, cooperative, eager, and excited, a small minority has used this opportunity to express some truly difficult behaviors. Since I began substitute teaching at the middle school 3 years ago, I have personally only written 5 or so disciplinary referrals. So far this year, that number has jumped to over 10 in the first month alone. Most teachers have a similar story to relate. I can only imagine what it feels like for Mr. Dudek and Mr. Conforti to be confronted by this amount of paperwork and the time it demands to deal with the individual issues presented. Normally, paraeducators are an important buffer in this behavioral milieu that allows students' needs to be met more quickly and personally. Although underpaid and currently overworked, they have done their best to try to assist teachers in keeping classrooms productive and students engaged. This year, they have been working the entire school day from 8:25 until 3:15 with only half an hour for lunch. When they inquired about getting relief with a mandated 10-minute break during this time, the response was that they could have their break from 8:15 to 8:25 in the morning. I was insulted for them. As everyone here knows, or should know, there's a significant shortage of people in the paraeducator position at MUMS this year because it's been difficult to hire and retain them this year. A similar situation applies to substitute teachers. There is more I could say about the difficult situation this year at MUMS, but my intention is not to agonize over the problems. Many faculty and staff have expressed frustration over the weeks, and some have asked me to at least raise some of these issues to the board in the hopes that they can provide relief in some form or another. Could the board tap an existing teacher in the district that has an administrator's license to temporarily serve as a dean of students, or hire someone on a one-year contract similar to what was done last year, so that 3 administrators instead of 2 are dealing with the climate problem? Could the board authorize additional monies to provide one-time bonuses for existing paraeducators and signing bonuses to entice new paraeducators? Could similar bonuses be offered to get new temporary or part-time employees to cover lunch duties, or provide breaks for paraeducators so that they can get a proper daytime break, and teachers could meet in grade level teams to help build the teams they so desperately need instead of having to cover lunch duties because of staffing shortages? I do understand the important work everyone here is doing to create long-term policies and set consistent and fair rules for all of our schools to work. But I also understand that this board is really the only body that can provide the financial support that needs to happen to get MUMS through the current crisis. And I do not believe that the word crisis is hyperbolic today. This district has already lost paraprofessionals that have either experienced this situation who were so daunted by the prospect of facing a school year with the above demands. I have personally seen veteran teachers on the verge of tears with the stress or furious with what they believe is unresponsiveness to their plight. My hope is that some relief comes before we have more staffing losses that will only exacerbate this problem. If solutions are coming, please let them know. If they are not, please consider providing some relief. I thank you for your time and attention and listening to my remarks this evening.
Any other public comments in the room? Yes.
Hi, I'm Fairly Olson. I'm a senior and I'm part of the Student Coalition on Human Rights. And these are a lot of other members. And we're just here to reiterate our request that we made almost 2 years ago, like a year and a half ago, to raise the Black Lives Matter flag. We understand that a flag policy was written and not accepted. And we're hoping that that process can be, or that we can get some reassurance or just like clarity on how the process is going. And if not, we can look at different alternative ways to raise the flag or at least show our support. I sent an email last week about another flagpole, and I got a response that was a little, it didn't really answer my question. And so I'm wondering if that my question still stands and our question still stands. Like, is that another option since the flag policy is taking a really long time? And so we're just hoping that the process can be a little faster. It has been like almost 2 years now. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments in the room? Yes, sir.
Thank you. My name is David Stoll. I'm a professor of anthropology at Millbury College. I'm not here as a representative of my institution, but as an anthropologist, I have studied social conflict for a long time. And I'm actually going to speak in opposition to what Fairley has just expressed to you. I would like to point out an odd little feature of both the Black Lives Matter slogan and dueling slogans, notably Blue Lives Matter, All Lives Matter. In lowercase, every member of this community, hopefully every American, subscribes to the belief that Black Lives Matter. We should all subscribe to the belief that all lives matter, and we should all subscribe to the belief that Blue Lives Matter. When those words are capitalized, it turns them, possibly could turn them into the name of a particular organization with an agenda. And even if it doesn't, capitalizing them becomes political or potentially political. So our foreseeable problem with either the main flagpole or the secondary flagpole is that once we fly the Black Lives Matter sign, we have to be open to the possibility that Blue Lives Matter people will get organized and ask to fly the Blue Lives Matter flag. We could have pro and anti-abortion flags up there. We could have don't tread on me flags up there. What does that mean? Is that politically reactionary? Is that acceptable? My feeling is that while I'm supportive of any political activity by students or members of the community in favor of Black Lives Matter, either lowercase or uppercase, that's perfectly acceptable to me. I respect your right to do it, even if I personally do not support all features of the Black Lives Matter organization agenda. I don't, but I certainly support your right to support it if you want. Once we put it up the flagpole, you as a board trying to represent the community and trying to deal with, I'm sure, really difficult issues that cannot be avoided. You're in effect inviting yourself into an arena where in the end, you're going to antagonize people that need to be brought together because of some other issue. And it's just sort of a small, stupid example of what can happen. In the Middlebury police log from a few weeks ago, I failed to find the issue. In the Middlebury police log, you will see a little notice that a woman reportedly shows up at Porter Hospital wearing a Blue Lives Matter face mask. And either through her fault, very possibly, or through the fault of a Porter Hospital staff member, this Blue Lives Matter face mask got in the way of her treatment. That may have been completely the fault of the patient. A staff member may have been at fault. But one of the things that set this up, perhaps, in the mind of whoever wore that Blue Lives Matter face mask in there, is that Porter Hospital now flies the flag of a political organization out front. They've got a Black Lives Matter flag out front. Now, Porter Hospital can explain to you why they're doing it, and the reason they're doing it, they want to show that they're accepting to everyone. It's a great motive. But if Porter Hospital wants to show that you're open to everyone in the community of all political opinions, I would argue there's actually a better way than flying a Black Lives Matter flag in front of your institution. They would not fly a Planned Parenthood flag in front of their institution. They would not fly a Republican or Democratic flag or a progressive or Green Party flag in front of their institution. They wouldn't do any of that. So on those grounds, I would urge you to adopt some kind of a stay neutral flag policy, which probably gets down to the American flag, the Vermont state flag, and perhaps flags affiliated with non-political institutions. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Any comments from folks online?
Okay, Amy Mason.
Can you hear me okay?
Ken, you're a little bit muffled, Amy. Check your mic.
I'll take out my earbuds. Can you hear me now?
Much better, thank you.
Okay, thank you. So people can hear me but not see me, is that right?
A picture of you.
Okay, thank you. Hi, my name is Amy Mason. I'm a parent of 3 students in our school system, and I live in Weybridge. First of all, I want to say happy birthday to board member Betty Kafumbe, who's spending her birthday here with us. Betty, thank you for your service on the board and for thoughtfully contributing to conversations that I imagine might be personally painful at times. I look forward to voting for you again. I'm also here to read a statement by my 8th grader, Juniper, who wanted to share perspective as a student who cares deeply about the decision around the Black Lives Matter flag. I hope that whatever direction the board takes with this, you'll keep in mind the impact on individual students like Juniper, who will feel more or less safe and welcome at school based on the outcome of your deliberations. Now, Juniper is white and privileged in many ways, but as part of the LGBTQ+ community, June wants to remind us that while the flag decision should center students of color, it also impacts students from other historically and currently marginalized groups. And here's June's statement. What I hope the ACSD board will keep in mind in deciding about a flag policy is that we need to be as accepting as possible. I think the board already is trying to keep this in their minds, but considering the vote about flying a Black Lives Matter flag recently, I think more could be done. I think people often mistakenly imagine the Black Lives Matter movement as political. I think the board's worry is that people will assume this and may worry there will be lawsuits. The school board needs to step up and be confident and brave. Even just the fact that some school board members voted against the flag policy is worrying to me. As a queer person, I feel less safe in a space where people refused a Black Lives Matter flag because people who are racist are also often homophobic or transphobic. The point of school is that students can learn in a place they feel safe in. People need to feel safe in our schools. Please consider my points and take them seriously. What matters is that our students feel safe and accepted, and right now that feeling of safety is at risk because of the decisions that have been and could be made. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Carrie.
Oh, can you hear me?
Are you all set?
Thank you. Hi, I'm Carrie Duquette Hoffman. I'm the mom of 3 students in the school district, 2 at MUHS and 1 at MUMS. And first, I just want to thank you all so much for your leadership. Right now, I know leadership on the school board, having been married to a school board member for a long time, is truly hard. And right now, I can only imagine it's even harder. And so I just want to express my really deep appreciation for that. I also have been reflecting on what leadership means when we're at a time during a pandemic and at a time where when we're really as a country, hopefully starting to reckon with racism in our communities. And I know that that requires creativity and change and growth in that leadership, and that is incredibly vulnerable. So I appreciate the efforts that you each are making and encourage you to keep making those changes. I know I've had to, and I've learned a lot and grown a lot, and I feel like I'm a better person because of it. I want to express my support for the Black Lives Matter flag, and I want to first express that I feel like the wrong conversation is being had about the flag. Just because something has been politicized doesn't mean that it's political. It is true that Black Lives Matter, period. That's a full sentence. And it is also true that even in Vermont, where we often think of ourselves as quite progressive, health disparities exist for Black folks in our communities and people of color in general in our communities. And this is something that as communities, we need to recognize and actively work against. I believe that the flag is a symbolic gesture and is an important one, an important place to start. And I would love for you all to continue to revisit this conversation and think of it more as the civil rights issue and the support of faculty, staff, and community members that it could be. But I also hope that you continue to do this work in a less symbolic way, in a deeper way, and really work to make our communities the communities that we're all hoping for. And once again, I just so appreciate your time and your work.
Thank you.
Okay, Ann Sunderland.
Yes, hello. Can you hear me? Yes?
We can.
Okay. My name is Nancy Sunderland. I live in Bridport. I have 5 children that have been or are currently in ACSD. My oldest just became a UVM graduate in May. I have 1 elementary age student currently being homeschooled. I have 1 at MUMS and 2 at MUHS. My comment is regarding curriculum at MUMS as well as parental communication practices. I'd like to ask the board to consider requiring that every teacher send home a hard paper copy of syllabus with a list of all reading materials that would be covered in class for the year. This year, on September 2nd, I requested a syllabus from the INS teacher for the 8th grade via email. My request was ignored for 19 days. It took over 13 emails and 2 phone calls with the principal before I received a copy of the syllabus. It's almost as if the school didn't want me to have this information. I should also note that the information the principal provided me was not entirely available on ManageBack. This was disheartening. I'm thankful that I do have the information now. One of the things that was in the email was a book that would be used in 2 classes that I found was not developmentally appropriate for middle school age children and was also highly divisive and controversial. So again, I would just like to please ask the board to consider a policy that parents have a hard copy of the syllabus, including all reading materials that will be used in the class for that year. Thank you.
Okay, this looks like Rutland area branch of the NAACP, perhaps.
Hi, can you hear me? My name is Caitlin Gildrian, and I am the Vice President of the Rutland Area NAACP, and I'm also a parent of 2 elementary age students. And I would like to read a statement on behalf of our branch and our president, Mia Schultz, with regard to the flag policy. The Rutland Area NAACP, which serves the Rutland, Bennington, and Addison counties, endorses the flying of Black Lives Matter flags in Vermont institutions, including schools. Raising the Black Lives Matter flag is not a political statement. It serves as a recognition and reminder that Black lives in Vermont are important despite of the ways systems fail to support that. At the Rutland Area NAACP, we know that Black children throughout the state have not yet seen themselves fully and properly represented. They continue to endure unchecked and unaccounted for racism, both overtly and covertly, and they are disproportionately disciplined by administrators and police in schools. This is proven with both qualitative and quantitative data. Raising the Black Lives Matter flag is one step toward acknowledgement of the work that is needed to address the inequities that Black people experience in Vermont and throughout the world. That is not a political point. It is a commitment to express and appreciate our shared humanity. And I would like to thank the board for your time and for allowing comment, and invite you either individually or as a board to reach out to our branch if you would like support or educational resources around these issues.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Priscilla Jimenez.
Hello, can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. My name is Priscilla. I live in Middlebury. I have 1 student, my daughter, attending school in Middlebury. I am new to this discussion. I am not aware of the flag policy, but recently listening to what's going on, I support the students. I support their leadership. As a multiracial woman of color, it's this simple. If I'm walking down the street and I need help and I see a Black Lives Matter sign, I will go to that house. To the point that the gentleman made earlier about the Blue Lives Matter discussion about, well, this may open the door to other people wanting to put their flags up. Let me just reiterate what other people have said. This isn't a political statement. My life matters. And Blue Lives Matter was created just in direct opposition to Black Lives Matter. The creation of Blue Lives Matter is in itself racist. So no, they're not in the same category. Neither is the swastika going to be considered to be put up at our schools. It's simply that Black Lives Matter. Middlebury, Vermont strives to be a more inclusive community. And yes, I do think this is a symbolic first step. It is not the deep work that is needed to really change our community, but it is a symbolic step that a lot of communities across this country need. So I support the Black Lives Matter flag being put up at any school. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Joanna Cowell. Cole.
Hi there, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Hi, thank you. I'm not gonna talk for a long time. I just wanted to say a couple things. I'm Joanna Caldwell. I am the mom of a recent MUHS graduate. Her graduating class, they really wanted the school to have a Black Lives Matter statement, and what they ended up doing right before graduation was they went and they painted on pieces of paper and wrote the names on pieces of paper of all the people in the United States that they could find out about who had been killed by police during the 4 years that they were in school. And a lot of people probably saw these names tied onto the fence outside the high school. It was very sad and awful, and I was really proud of the kids that that's how they wanted to mark their graduation. And they also wrote Black Lives Matter in chalk and on signs. And the kids really understand this. The kids are out in front of us. The adults in the community, I just appreciate those of you who have spoken so far to support the kids. They want this at their school. They want it on the flagpole. It belongs on the flagpole. That is why all these other schools in Vermont have already done this. South Burlington, Mount Abe, Mill River High School. Montpelier was the first school in the whole country to put up a Black Lives Matter flag on their official school flagpole. So we know it can be done. We know it's being done all over Vermont. Black Lives Matter is true, it is correct, and we need to get behind our students and support them in doing this. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Tara Afalter.
Hello. My name is Tara Afalter. I am a professor of education studies at Middlebury College, but I'm here as a concerned citizen. I too want to speak in favor of the school raising the Black Lives Matter sign, in particular, flag, I'm sorry. In particular, I want to tie us back to the mission of ACSD and the educational mission. In particular, our mission is to provide an innovative, rigorous, and supportive educational community that inspires a passion for learning and cultivates empathy and responsibility. Further, as our district has moved into being an IB, IB aims to develop inquiring, knowledgeable, and caring young people who create a better and more peaceful world through intercultural understanding and respect. I think, again, as many other folks that have spoken have pointed out, that yes, while this is a symbolic gesture, it is part of the work to battle the miseducation that we receive throughout this country around race and to battle white supremacy. I think flying the Black Lives Matter sign is one step consistent with what the stated mission of the district is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Rebecca Strum.
Hi, can you hear me?
Hi, Becky.
Hi. My name is Becky Strum. I am a Weybridge resident. While I did not have students go through the school system here, I do come to you as with a 43-year career as a public school teacher and school administrator. And I think one of the most important lessons that I learned during those 43 years was to listen and to hear our students. And so I come to you tonight and ask you to listen to our students. I applaud those students who are supporting the Black Lives Matter flag, and I wholeheartedly support what they are doing and ask that you listen to them. As Joanna said, they are out ahead of us. They are teaching us. We can learn from them. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Bobby Loney.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, okay. I am a parent of two former students from Middlebury who are now adults, and one of them has two kids at the high school and at Mom's right now. And I'm on to give my strong support that the Black Lives Matter flag be raised, and my strong support and admiration for the kids who are putting that forward. And I have to say that when I heard that that wasn't kind of just a done deal, I was astounded, because I think that speaks, it goes against what I would expect from our community. And I do appreciate, having been in education for over 40 years, how hard it is to be a school board member and the work you do. And I thank you for it. And that's what I have to say.
Thank you.
Okay, Jason Duquette Hoffman.
I'm done, right?
Hi. Thanks very much for all the work that you are doing and the thought that you are putting into this. Like many others tonight, I'd like to speak in favor of the board approving the flying of a Black Lives Matter flag at our district schools. And I would like to echo so many of the sentiments that I've heard so far this evening and so ably put. But as Professor Affolter reminded us, the mission of our district is really a key guidepost for our decision-making here. We heard so eloquently from Priscilla about her experience of seeing those words, that Black Lives Matter, and knowing that that may mean a safe space. And if we are to cultivate the kind of environment for learning that we say we will in our mission, then we need to recognize that that needs to be a reality for our students. The question that we're grappling with here is not about student voice. Though students have, as others have said, been real leaders and guides for our community in thinking about this. This is not a policy question about how to allow student expression. This is a question about our values as a district and what we are saying to our students and our community members through those policies and through those values. And if we cannot, in fact, say to our Black community members, our Black students, our Black teachers and faculty and staff, that their lives do in fact matter, and affirm that we understand that it is important to say that, then we are not living up to the values that we espouse in our mission statement as an IB district and in our professional work. And I hope that we can live into our responsibility as an organization constituted to help our community learn by leading in helping people to learn about this and why this statement is so important. This, as Joanna so clearly said, this and others, this is not new. We're not charting new territory. We don't have to reinvent a wheel. There is plenty of examples of this out there. And the real, I think, crux of this, right, is that there are so many issues that can be politicized that our district does already make policy on. You know, we have a policy around masks and vaccinations. Those things have been politicized, but we recognize as a district that the health and safety of our community members, matters. And just because those things become politicized does not mean that we have to shy away from them and be fearful of saying, no, we're going to center the health and safety of our community. This is no different. We are talking about centering the safety and the well-being of members of our community and telling our community members what our values are here. So I hope that that is the lens that you will bring to this decision-making. And as you parse this out, that you will continue the good work of helping our community to understand why this discussion is so important. Thank you.
Thank you.
Carrie?
Yeah, sure. Great. As always, I want to thank everyone for taking the time to provide public comment. And I also, again, want to thank this community for the way in which they have gone about doing that. It is greatly appreciated and respected. Next up, recommendation to approve minutes of the September 13th, 2021 board meeting. May I get a motion?
I'll make a motion.
And a second, Victoria. Any discussion or comment? Any discussion on the minutes? Great. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And we're gonna need to get Suzanne somehow up there.
Aye.
Oh, there she is. Aye, great. Any opposed? So, discussion?
Abstain.
Oh, and Jen Buceder abstaining.
On the agenda, we talked about.
Great, next up, approve the ACSD bills. Chip.
There was one set of bills read today by myself and total two.
That's fine, because what I was
Jason,
This is
the
top, right?
the top one.
Can you, Jason, can you mute?
Perfect. Thank you.
First one is general account bills, $226,547.52. No issues there. And the second is the payroll warrant for that time frame. And the last one, and that's, as I said I would do last time, was report the net pay column.
Yep.
Which is $802,221,097. I move that those bills be paid.
I second it.
Great. Any discussion or comment? All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? So moved. Next up, report of the superintendent. Budget process and timeline.
Okay. Before I do that, just a quick update on health and safety. Things a lot happens in 2 weeks' time, so just a quick update. You probably all saw that the 5 through 11 vaccine looks like it's kind of getting closer and closer. So we expect to hear more this week in our Thursday meeting with Secretary French to figure out potential timeline in terms of how that will impact Vermont and our students. That's really, really exciting. One of the big things in terms of 5 through 11 vaccination, and those of you who were connected in some way to our positive case at Moms last week know that when you have a lot of unvaccinated students, the requirements are different than if a student is vaccinated in terms of quarantining. So when our 5 through 11 students are vaccinated, a lot of the contact tracing will be significantly simplified for a couple of reasons. One, because they're vaccinated and they don't have to stay away from school unless they're showing symptoms. The second piece is that we were all set and ready to go with surveillance testing. The state was supporting I think maybe half of the districts in the state had signed up to do surveillance testing, where we would be doing testing periodically, and it's something that we did last year a little bit too. They started it like a week ago, and then they pulled the plug last week, towards the end of the week, because they're moving towards what Massachusetts has been doing since the start of the year, which is called test and stay, where if a student is considered a close contact, instead of staying home and quarantining for a week and getting tested, they are coming to school and they're doing a rapid test, and then they're essentially just every day they're testing. So the state is working on that right now. I don't have any other specifics yet, but because they pulled the plug on surveillance testing, which was months of preparation, I imagine that this is going to be a go pretty soon. And that's another positive just in terms of keeping kids in school. The final thing is, we also heard last week that I mentioned we were probably going to Vermont was going to fall under the required staff vaccination that came from the federal government. So that is true, that has been confirmed. And the state is now working on what the timeline and process is for that. So they said, they recommended, Secretary French recommended the district wait for the state to meet out what those requirements are and what that looks like. So we won't be doing that this week or next week. We'll be waiting, and I imagine we'll hear more in the next week or two regarding when that becomes effective.
And do you believe that the recent pickup in New York with regards to the legal finding, putting that decision on pause right now is going to have an impact?
I don't think so.
Okay.
No.
Great.
Peter, that's for every either government or company or whatever with 100 or more employees.
100 or more employees. However, there are some ways that, from what I heard, districts with fewer than 100 could also be impacted, because there are other 100 or more, and then there are other qualifiers for it as well. So I don't think it's going to be just large school district.
That was my question. Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Any other questions on that? Mary Heather?
Can you just clarify again this test and stay, how it works? Is this for vaccinated children who have been exposed but are not
showing symptoms or?
No, I
Can you
think
just clarify
it's vaccinated or unvaccinated, but I believe, but my understanding of it, and again, it's kind of more verbal at this point. I haven't seen it like in writing.
Yeah.
But essentially, you've got a positive case, you've got close contacts, and those students, for whatever window, whether that's 7 days or shorter, depending on when the close contact was, every day that they would be required to quarantine, they would be coming in and being tested to make sure that they're still negative, and then they would stay that day, and then the next day they would be tested again prior to the start of school. And my understanding is that the state would be supporting districts in implementing it as well.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Peter, do you have a question? Do parents have a choice on the testing?
Yeah, the parents could decide that they don't want to and just quarantine.
Okay, and their option is to keep them home then? Okay.
Yeah.
Lorraine and then Betty?
I'm just thinking about kids who like ride a bus. If they got to school and they were positive, would that be a problem?
I mean, that would be one of the logistics we'd have to figure out, is how to streamline it so that students aren't missing class and things like that. Because there's no way that we would, I mean, that came up, a question came up about taking the bus, so. Right.
Yeah. But presumably everybody's wearing masks.
The purpose is to keep people in school, correct?
Yeah, yeah.
Betty?
I was just wondering about the current, just clarification on the current guidelines around, especially the elementary schools or even moms or NUHS. If a student is positive, what are the current guidelines? Because I felt like there was a little bit of inconsistency. There's some who are requiring proof of, negative tests, and others who are not necessarily requiring that. You just call in and say, my child had a negative test, but there's no way of actually proving that. So are elementary schools or, and moms or NUHS requiring that you should provide proof of a negative test for anyone who may have been a close contact or somebody who's been quarantining and they want to come back?
Usually that test is after 7 days, so I don't believe if they don't have it and they're not showing symptoms after 7 days, I don't believe, I'm not actually positive whether they're showing those exam results to Kelly or to the school nurse. We've been asked, I know there was a conversation about collecting information from parents to come back. This happened earlier in the year when we had a couple of cases in Shoreham and people were asking about, how do we know? And I believe my recollection is that the state has said that you shouldn't be asking for that. You kind of are basically taking people's word for it. But in terms of kind of how it's happening in close contacts and stuff like that, in general right now, given the current guidance, it's in elementary case, you're looking at the whole class because if you spend more than 4 hours together, it has to be the entire group within that room. So that's generally what you'll see happening across the state. At the elementary level, it's around 20 kids or so. When you look at the middle school or high school, then it changes. The middle school is really different than the high school because high school has more vaccinated students, so the numbers are going to look different. But at the middle school, depending on the age and who the student is in contact with, that student is going to 8 different classes with different kids that they're sitting next to. So those numbers tend to be, in a case at a middle school, when a student is going through all those different classes, you could have 40 or 50 kids that are quarantining, which is challenging for one case.
No, I'm sorry I interrupted.
All good. And then you have, siblings, kids who may be vaccinated, but they can still pass on, to maybe younger siblings in the elementary school. So it's a little complex on that level.
It is, yeah. And we continue to work with, there are things that are happening outside of school too, right? There's a lot of, I would say more is happening honestly outside of school than inside of school. If you look at the numbers. And so we have to also constantly connect with Vermont Department of Health and others to make sure, because we have school guidelines, but we just do school, right? We're not doing what's happening outside of school. But there is an impact obviously on school when something is happening outside of school. So it gets a little bit complicated.
Mary Heather, I don't need to take this in a different direction, but I'm wondering if you can just give us an update for those students who do have to quarantine until this test and stay program becomes an option. How are those kids kind of being kept on board with their academics? How's that working?
Yeah, so we're kind of continuing to problem solve each case as it arises, because each case is really different. If you're in a situation where, we've talked with the association about this too, because it relates directly to, what are we asking teachers to do in these kinds of situations. And, if you have a class that goes fully remote, where the teacher's out, but not sick, for example, and all the students are out, then you're able to do something where the teacher is essentially teaching the students, but not physically in the classroom. So that is a possibility, but we haven't really had that happen yet in a clean kind of way where everyone's out for 1 week and everyone's learning kind of together in that way. What has happened thus far is you might have 5 or 6 kids that are in school, and then you'll have different kids that are coming back in 2 days and 4 days and 6 days. It's all different. So the teacher isn't able to, and one thing we've been really clear with teachers is we can't request that you teach 2 different classes at once, or you take on a second class. So if you have 4 or 5 kids quarantining and you're teaching 10 kids in class, we're not going to ask you to teach those 10 kids in class and teach the 4 or 5 kids that are quarantining. It's kind of 2 jobs. They're 2 different things. We are and I mentioned like every case is different. We are, as we always do, we are trying to send homework and keep kids, kind of keep work going for if students are out and the teacher is again like teaching their physical class in person. There were questions recently about going remote, and there was some stuff in the Acsd Independent about going remote. We have to, if we go below 50% of attendance within the school, then we can't count that as an attendance day. So you probably saw a couple schools went remote in Vermont last week because they didn't have enough students in the school to sustain a day. Currently, if that happens to us, we can try to make that a kind of quote unquote remote day, but it won't count towards an attendance day. So we'd have to get a waiver from the state to be able to count that as an attendance day. And that we're required to have 175 days in 1 year. So right now we have 175 exactly. So every day has to count. So we haven't fortunately run into that issue yet.
Barbara?
Yes, thank you. So in the case of Shore, was it because it was early on that it happened? Because I don't believe that the teacher did offer, at least that's what I heard, didn't offer, even though the whole class was out, there wasn't a remote training happening. So was that because it happened so quickly and we weren't really prepared for it, or?
Well, I can't really speak to specifics. I mean, because in certain circumstances, we don't know who and who wasn't able to be present, so.
Yeah, the whole class was out, is my understanding.
Right.
Yeah, so I think that would have solved a lot of frustration had we been able to do that, that people were voicing. You know, if in fact there was that option where kids could have continued on with their teacher, but just in a remote setting when the whole class was out. But in any case, another question with a rapid test, and just you mentioned something about not being able to control the community. And one thing that kind of is concerning me is if a family member tests positive, how confident are we that that child is really going to be quarantined or even stepping forward for a rapid test? You know, so if it happened in the school, right, and going forward, we're going to have a rapid test, and that child will be subjected to that test for the period of time that they need to. But if it's like, you know, a sibling or a parent tests positive, I'm a little nervous that that's not going to happen. And God, I would love to see rapid tests for everybody almost, you know, especially in the elementary school.
Yeah, I mean, I think, you know, we have to kind of rely on each other in the community, I think, in situations like that. And obviously continuing to have open lines of communication and communicate clearly. I know I've relied greatly, we've all relied greatly on Kelly over the last 20 months or whatever we're into right now. And she used to do a really good job and has been sharing those weekly updates and things like that. So I think we're, you know, I listen to lots of stories from other districts, from other superintendents who share what's happening, and I feel pretty lucky in terms of the team that we have here.
Yeah, a great team, but I'm just, the part we can't control is kind of scary.
Any other?
Okay. One last question. Do we have any idea if there's been any transmission within the school? Or is most of the cases probably community related coming in?
Yeah, I mean, each situation's kind of different, but I mean, you can tell if you look at our dashboard and the numbers of cases we haven't had widespread
within the schools.
Within the schools. No.
Okay. That means we're doing well.
Great.
Okay, so on to more exciting news, budget timelines.
There was,
I'm gonna hand it off to Logan.
A little sarcasm with that?
I was trying to give you like a great runway.
Yes. Starting off on a good foot.
Take it away.
So you guys received the budget process and timeline. To being my first time through this, to play it safe, I largely kept it, I reproduced it for the most part from the previous year. So that goes into a theme of, certainly before doing anything drastically different than we had done in the past, I'll certainly assimilate and say, all right, what if we stayed with status quo and rolled up the numbers and just increased things by a standard, maybe 3%, whatever the increase might be, where would that put us? And then make adjustments from there. On here it mentions budget drivers. I think as I'm getting into this, how this is gonna look on my end is, obviously enrollment kind of dictates things. And based on enrollment, you get a sense of staffing needs, certainly as people move through the grades, how section sizes might change, how the blending of classrooms might change. That then affects potential staffing needs. And then following up with the principals about that conversation and what their thoughts are. And then meeting with the individual departments, tech, for example, facilities, and that's kind of the starting point, and then moving from there towards more specific numbers.
And so we met with the finance committee last week, and Logan went through the timeline. We talked a little bit about this coming year and FY23 and budget drivers. You know, thinking about where we are right now. As a reminder, we are building FY23 without the threshold. So that's both a nice thing to be not focused on. At the same time, it's kind of lurking in the back somewhere of what are you going to become when you come back, which is kind of what we talked about in relation to the master plan as well. So we had I think a pretty good conversation about that. Chip, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, I mean, I think Peter talked about context when we were chatting with this, and then context is sort of broadened and uncertain. Mostly, number one, ESSER funds puts a little different ripple on some of this, especially as to facilities which would qualify under the ESSER funds. The whole idea of where the state is at in changing funding formulas, be it weighting formulas or whether they bring back even the threshold type management tool to keep school funding low or low as they want it to be. All of those things are up in the air. So we sort of have to, at least from the three of us that were there on that committee, felt that cautiously you have to go knowing that's all of that's out there. And as Logan said, that probably it's going to come down. We're going to be adding a little bit here and there on things, but this isn't a radical thing to, well, there's no threshold, let's increase the budget to do all those things that we'd love to do, and then find ourselves unable to sustain that. Or even get it voted positively. So, I think there's lots of moving parts in this, more than other years, only because of this unknown of the state funding and the ESSER funds and how all that interacts with facilities committee planning long-term. So, I mean, that's all we really did is have this discussion, which we just, we made no decisions, and they're gonna come back to us, obviously, us and the board, maybe first and then the board, as to sort of where things are at any particular point. And we don't have a date on that yet, obviously, but one other thing came up, and it had to do, I think, just from reporting. We were, not that the audit's the only thing going, but we didn't get our audited report until June, which was crazy. So there will be some effort. There's 1 year contract left with the company that's doing it now, and there will be some effort to decide whether we look somewhere else down the road. And Logan also brought up the fact that there may be a different way we can facilitate helping by adding information along the way earlier if we can in piecemeal manners. They only bring it up because the audit was fine, but very frustrating for not having it over that period of time. So.
Sure, but I think it'll be, at least from my perspective, it'll be important that not only for current consideration, but also just for historical comparison as we move forward in future years, to truly note not only on the revenue side of where ESSER funds are coming in, but on the debit side where those ESSER funds are being applied at the category level, so that we will easily be able to compare and contrast in future years. Otherwise, it's going to be hard to make that tie back. And we might get a distorted view of investment without really understanding where those dollars are coming from.
Yeah, that was my point exactly in the meeting too, that we have to be really clear when we put out our annual report, what money is being used where. I think I agree 100%.
There was one other glitch in the ointment potentially too, and that's the fact that the state may abandon e-finance. Which is the major system that everybody has been forced to become part of, and that has been such a terrible disaster. So it's hard enough, apparently, but it's hard enough to sort of manage and control situations when you like the system you're using, or at least you can adapt to it. But this is another glitch that doesn't relate to the dollars of the budget, but relates to just those kinds of issues as to how you categorize, where you cubbyhole everything so that we can do just what you're saying.
So just a couple of things that I wanted to add too. So one, when we talked about ESSER in the committee meeting, we did talk about the only place that we probably will see a difference in our general budget, not our kind of grants management sits off on the side, is going to be if we reduce the budget in FY23 for facilities and counteract that with some of the ESSER funds. So that's really the only place I would foresee it displacing something that's currently already in the voted budget, so to speak.
Right, but there's the nuance of we've assigned, there is personnel staff moving forward that we are using ESSER funds for.
Yes.
And so I think it's gonna be important that that baseline is established so that in a couple of years, when that might have to be a different story, we can easily point to, well, this revenue source is no longer present. It's not just that we're cutting funds. You know what I mean?
Yep.
So I just, it's a little bit of a cautionary approach, I think.
Yeah.
And I think it's gonna be important whenever you have, especially an organization this size with this budget, whenever you have unusual fiscal events, you should note them and make it as clear as possible when folks are reviewing that budget.
Absolutely. The second thing I was going to mention is, every year on 12/15 is the magic date where we get equalized pupils. And so it's been a really weird couple of years. Last year, we had a static number, so it wasn't a real equalized number last year. I don't know, I haven't heard yet what they're gonna do for some magic formula for this equalized pupil number. But that is, that can change this conversation really quickly from, wow, everything is looking great to, how did this happen? I mean, it's literally like a giant pendulum swing. It could just, so we're gonna do everything we can to get that information prior. Every business manager in the state says it's not a smart idea to try to estimate your equalized pupil number and build a budget with your estimate, because you're gonna always be wrong. And I think this year probably more than any other year, just because things have been in flux at the state level. So I just wanted to mention that we're gonna be kind of watching that.
Mary?
I have a question. Do we know how many students returned this year versus previous enrollment that was more reliable back in early 2019 and 20? Do we know how many students did we lose or gain this year? Do we know?
So our total enrollment, I think, is 1660. I believe we're up by, I think, maybe 40 or so. Yeah.
Cool. So that was gonna be my question. I was like, when do we officially?
I was gonna follow up on your point here about the equalized pupil and how that could change things. I guess my question is really related to the tools that the state uses to control local spending, right? And obviously the threshold has been temporarily paused, but are there other tools that we can anticipate them using instead of that, that we should be kind of on the lookout for when we're considering this year's budget?
There aren't any built into this current fiscal year. I mean, other than the tax rate is.
True.
So that's probably the biggest impact in terms of on our community. But yeah, there aren't going to be any other kind of ceilings that the state puts on spending.
Barb?
Yeah. Do we, when, and I should remember this, when do the official enrollment numbers, that snapshot of ADM happen? Is it early October? It's in there for November.
October is when the state pulls the numbers.
When we pull, yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're
So
required to
then
send it to the state, and
we
that's.
still have a sense for, across our schools, what our enrollment is and what the puts and takes are and stuff like that.
And they do that, they're looking ahead to figuring out what the tax rate is. And so they need to start getting information on what they're funding, right? Because we're state funded, we're not locally funded. Like state, I mean, people think it's local, but it's actually state. So the state has to look and see, okay, based on how many pupils they have and based on where we think their budget's going to go, the budget process, the tax rate's probably going to need to be around here, here, or here. And they look at other state revenue as well. But it's it's just such an early process. When you look at how you would normally budget, it's early.
Well, we have a new business manager to buckle up.
I'm a blank slate.
We're looking forward to it, my friend. Looking forward to it. Outstanding. Anything else, Peter?
That's it.
Okay, great. Thank you. Next up, report of the board. First on that agenda is the state board meeting on the Ripton withdrawal. It's been reported in the Addison Independent and I know discussed in various ways. Peter and I participated during the Zoom meeting with the State Board of Ed that intention was to provide a decision which led to a request with regards to where they were going to place Ripton for their supervisory services. And as we discussed at the previous board meeting, there was 3 options that had been formulated and a recommendation that had been given by the Secretary of Education. And those 3 options, just to review, were creating Ripton as its own school district. Therefore, Ripton as a school district would be required to provide all of its own services, to assign Ripton to a supervisory union to receive those services, or to return ACSD to a supervisory union, have ACSD as a school district, a district within that supervisory union along with Ripton. Secretary French had sent a memo that was providing recommendation to the State Board of Ed that he was not comfortable in asking either a current supervisory union or ACSD to go backwards in their work that they had been working on in formulating their own district and change all that. And so his recommendation was going to be to the State Board of Ed, that Ripton become its own school district. The State Board of Ed during that meeting discussed the true challenge that that places on Ripton. And Ripton also shared that they felt as they had taken on this process, that as an option was really never on the table in their mind based upon information that they believed they had received, and that at this point where they are, they're in a very difficult position to take on that responsibility as a school district providing those services.
Mayor, can you just in terms of terminology, do you mean supervisory district or?
Supervisory district, yeah.
They would be their own thing.
And so what was presented then by the chair of the State Board of Ed was a clear recognition that they were going to be asked to make a decision in which someone was going to be very unhappy. And the chair also recognized that asking Ripton to take on those responsibilities was going to be very difficult for them to fulfill those responsibilities. And yet the chair was very clear in saying, asking ACSD to become a supervisory union is also something that he did not feel he could support, and that the board would not be supporting, the state board would not be supporting. And early on in the discussion, he removed even one of the supervisory unions from consideration because Ripton didn't seem to think it was going to work, and nor did that supervisory union, so they just took that one off the table. So after Peter spoke, folks from Ripton spoke, the chair asked me some questions. We were asked to go back to the table, and the chair and the State Board of Ed would truly like to see Ripton find a way to come back to ACSD so that we don't have to go down this path. Everyone, no, I shouldn't say that. It was discussed that doing that presents logistical issues that nobody had answers to right then and there. Mm-hmm. Would a new vote be required? What does this mean for? Like, there's a whole host of things that we definitely don't have answers to. Mm-hmm. But before we get to that, the chair would like for the parties to work towards a solution that wouldn't require Ripton to become a supervisory district. that being said, the chair was also, I believe, fairly clear that if that's not the case, the recommendation would then stand that Ripon become a supervisory district.
But in a year later then.
But in a year later than the timeline that's currently put forward, which brought up another host of questions, is do we even have to vote for, does there need to be a vote for that to take place as well? So that's where we are. And Peter, I don't know if you have any updated folks from Ripon have reached out to you.
Not yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
So as a board, you know, I think Peter's done a tremendous job of being the conduit between the Ripon School Board and the district, and it would be my recommendation that that continues. But we need to provide some type of guidance to Dr. Burrows with regards to how we should, as a board, how we as a district should approach this. And, you know, I do think that there needs to be a couple of key considerations or key concepts clarified before we can even move forward. And that is making sure that the three individuals that are on the school board are representing the voice and the intentions of Ripon at this point with regards to next steps. Because what they voted on, this is different than that too. And so before anybody starts reacting to stuff, you know, based upon the conversation that we had at the state board meeting, it seems that there needs to be some clarity within Ripon to take as the first next step. At least that's kind of how I would, I don't know, Peter, if you want to add anything to that.
I mean, I think you know, when the state board chair said, you know, you have until November to kind of talk through and see what that looks like. I mean, I guess I haven't heard back from Ripon yet, so I don't know what they're thinking or what their intention is. So I think that makes sense to hear what their, you know, what their thoughts are in terms of you know, where do we go between here and November? What is the work that they see that needs to happen, and what is their kind of thought in terms of hearing from the state board and you know, what it means to stay in ACSD, et cetera.
And you know, again, this is my perspective. I think there needs to be clarity on our part in that, you know, there have been things that have been shared with regards to why this has occurred, like wanting the charter change so that if the school is to close, that town needs to have to vote for that school to be closed. And Ripon wanting that charter to be different, and if that charter was different, maybe or maybe not, we wouldn't be here. And the other issue was the feeling as if their school was going to be closed. And that those two things were impetus for moving towards a path that withdrew them from ACSD. And so we just, you know, before we get into the details of that, I think it's important that they come back and say to us, this is what our town
how much is already on Dr. Burrow's plate and the district, and we heard from teachers, there's a lot going on right now, and there's a lot to manage, is not, to within the, the spirit of the guidance, to obviously have discussions. My opinion is the onus on this is more on Ripton at this point, and that minimal effort, at least in sort of initiating and being creative with solutions, needs to come from Dr. Burrow, especially if more work needs to be done by us. I guess we can take that on. I'm concerned that this is a distraction and extra time away from other real work that needs to be happening at the superintendent's office.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Other comments? Barb?
Yeah, and I totally understand that, but at the same token, I think what I heard was agreement on both sides that they would try to work together. So, we have to have that spirit, I think, to some extent.
Yeah, I mean, I feel as if I was, the chair asked me after everybody had chatted thoughts, and I said, the ACSD has been very clear on one thing, in that we are going to do everything we can to do everything we can for all students. Mm-hmm. That we have been clear on, we are not swaying from that. Mm-hmm. That being said, our realities are not changing. And we can't go into, I hesitate to go into a situation in which there is a belief that the realities that got us here are going to go away. And therefore we need to have a different discussion. So, while again, we will do everything we can for every kid that we can, I do think it's on Ripton to come to us and say, our town feels we need this. Our town feels this way about where we are. We need to know that before we can, I think, respond to anything. Mary Heather.
Yeah, I also watched the state board meeting and agree that both you and Peter represented the district well, and I appreciate you doing so. I mean, I think my personal feeling is, look, I'm supportive of Ripton remaining in the district. I kind of always have felt that way. Even though I did support their departure because it was expressed that that's what they wanted. And I think I'm supportive of this extension, and if they're interested in staying, I support that. And I truly believe their students are best served by ACSD, but not at the expense of our governance structure, which is what we expressed as a board at this to the State Board of Education. Nor at the expense of our educational goals and the abilities of our schools to collectively deliver those to all of our students. So I think it's really important, and I guess I would sort of suggest this as one of our guardrails in the discussions, that ACSD needs to maintain its autonomy in decision-making regarding the collective resources of the district. And I don't think it's fair or appropriate for us to be put in a position to make any promises to any of our member towns about school closure, about, any particular resources. I think we as a district need to maintain that autonomy. I mean, we don't know exactly what's coming down the road. So, I think that's an important guardrail. For us that, no, we can't make any promises about anybody's school. We can't. It's not appropriate for us to elevate students in one town over students of other member towns. I just don't think that's appropriate. It's certainly against all the oaths that we took as board members. So I think, while consolidation may be on pause right now, I don't think it will always be on pause. And we have to keep that in mind in the long view. And, I think the pressure to reconfigure in the face of financial pressure is something that we will see again relatively soon. And I think ACSD, needs to be able to manage resources and to be able to remain financially viable, because that is ultimately how we're going to be able to deliver on our mission. So I think that's a really important guardrail, and I would also agree with Chip about the chart. A lot of work went into that. And I think right now we're at a crossroads where essentially, the district is being asked, are you gonna change this? Are you going to change this to relieve some of this discomfort? And I don't think that best serves the students.
Lorraine?
I watched it as well, and I would just say.
Must see TV.
It was very exciting viewing. And Laura, yes, I would agree that they did ask us to go work together, but they asked us to work together, but I think it's very important for the board to make it clear that we have not, or unless we have changed our opinion, that we are not going to do a charter change so they can vote whether or not they want to keep their school open, and to change representation, which was another thing they didn't like. We aren't going to promise we're not going to close the school. And I think Ripton, if that's how we also feel, that Ripton needs to know that so they can bring that to the population, and then they can make a decision from there if they want to try and come back in. And we can make that happen, that they have to vote, or, they'll have to vote or whatever. But I think it's important that our board make that statement up front that things are not going to change. So if they want to come back, they have to come back knowing that that's the way it's going to be. And I don't think we need to wait first for them, because I think in order for them to make that decision, they need to know what our decision is.
Chip?
One other comment, and the nuance that started all this with Ripton saying, well, we'll just contract, or we'll just ask them to help us with this stuff. Peter, can you just help us with this? And special ed, can you just sort of do this? Sort of outside the realm of a supervisory union and sort of contracting with somebody. It became obvious that that wasn't really part of the discussion and feasibility, because there's nothing in the law that states that.
Correct.
At least in what I could understand from what they're saying. And so that's important too, is that we're not just resisting communication and interaction. We only have so many alternatives, we as this district, in how do we, quote, interact and communicate and help. I don't want to see us on the negative side of this, because we didn't help Ripton get to the point where they are, or where they want to be.
Lindsay, and then Amy, and then Victoria.
I want to ask about the charter change idea. I've heard that come up a lot, and is it a common charter that impacts all of the schools in the district? Would it, if one of the things that is a sticking point is a change in the charter to say the town must vote to close the school, how would that impact all of the other schools in the district if that were broached as just is that school by school, or would that impact all schools in the district?
Yeah, it would impact all
All
schools in the
schools in the
district.
district.
So right now the
Unless
charter.
you change the charter to say for one town only, which I think would be strange.
Okay, so that would be looking at that particular detail of the charter, and so that was one of two things, the school closure and the charter change, are those the two main points?
I think the charter change was, I think there were two issues. One issue was the town wanted to change the language to the town closing the school versus the board by supermajority. And then the second part was the board representation and the board makeup, which I think would be either weighted voting. I mean, based on the analysis we did with legal counsel that the charter committee did, this board was put together based on the population of every town to make it constitutional. And so to change that, you would either have to go to, my understanding is you have to go to weighted voting where, you know, you might have 3 people from a town, but they each have 0.25 of a vote or something like that. So you have to then weight the different votes. You know, you can have more people on the board, but then you have to weight how much each person gets.
I know that we'd like to maintain the same size board that we currently are. Ripton's vote would be 0.25 versus 7 because of the population difference. There's such a huge differential in population with our small towns and Middlebury. So that's so.
And to clarify the first comment on the charter, the chair of the state board, I think, was also fairly clear that he also did not see or nor would recommend a charter change as a result of this.
Okay, yeah, I've heard that come up before, and I'm just wondering about the idea of the board versus the town. Does that go way back to the roots of consolidation, that decision that the board has the final say versus the town? Where did the town, I wasn't around. I guess I could go deep into the archives.
Suzanne's got her hand up, and I think she was co-leading that.
Yeah.
So I think she should speak to that.
Suzanne, do you have a question, or do you want to answer the charter question?
Well, the charter question that first got me to put my hand up was around the representation. When we first were looking to change from supervisory union to district, the board could only be of a certain size, and I don't believe the board could be over 18 members.
Right.
But it also had to equally represent all voters in the district by towns, even though our votes are commingled. Representation is based on population within each of the individual towns. Middlebury has always had the wonderful, or maybe not so wonderful, fact that they are home to Middlebury College. And due to federal legislation, all of those college students are allowed to vote and to be registered as Middlebury voters, which puts their numbers up even higher. So that's why it's kind of, we decided we wanted to have an odd number. We didn't really want 18 members because we thought we'd never get anything done. Not exactly. I think when we finally started talking population wise, that's where we ended up, was 13. But Peter is correct in the weighting. You could add more members to the board, but then the votes would be weighted, meaning that if you had 3 people, you might only have, say, a quarter of a vote between those 3. So now you have to get 3 people from a town to all agree on how they're going to do their quarter of a vote or whatever percentage it is. So that was, there was one other board that had weighted votes at the time that we went to district, and they tried to explain it to us, and we're like, my God, this would be just so difficult to figure out how to do this. So that's why we chose not to go that route. And then the piece around closing of schools, we worked really hard on that, and we did not want the townspeople to feel that the board could just willy-nilly vote to close a school, and that's why it requires a supermajority of the board to close a school. But that was a long contested issue within the group that moved all the charter pieces forwards. So I personally would hate to see either one of them changed, although with the latest in, once we have the census numbers, then board representation might change depending on population shifts in the town, but I haven't seen the current census numbers, so I wouldn't know that answer. So I hope that helps some people in their understandings.
Jen?
Isn't there one more,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry.
No, go ahead.
I just wanted to add, I feel like there's one more piece to that, and that it wasn't a board decision to create that charter, that every town voted on that charter, correct? So the taxpayers or voters from each town agreed that that was the charter that they wanted for this, the unified district. Is this correct?
You're correct, Jennifer. It was the committee that wrote the articles for the charter. But then the way the legislation was written was that for everything to go forwards, every single town had to vote in the affirmative. And that was really the only time that individual votes, town votes, were not commingled, because every town had to go forwards with it. If one town had said no, we would have had to go back to the drawing board, restructure, or maybe just put forward the same articles all over again and re-vote. But I think that was probably the longest night that any board member had probably sat up for, because I don't think the votes were all in until probably 2 o'clock or 3 o'clock in the morning. But every single town voted unanimously, including Ripton. And when I say unanimously, it means that the vote went to the yes. Can't remember the exact vote counts, but every single town said yes to all of the articles and to the charter changes. So.
Amy, then Victoria?
I just wanted to make the point that, when Ripton voted in January, and this was part of the argument I was trying to make to my townspeople, which is there's so much information we don't have, this is feeling rushed. These are the kinds of questions that we didn't have the answers to. And I do, I haven't heard anything in town, nothing on front porch forum, nothing on whatever the town newsletter, and that kind of stuff. So I don't know if any communication has started. But I will say that I would not be surprised if 60 people, which was the difference in the vote, would feel very differently if the vote were taken today. So I do intend to encourage our colleagues on the board there to, or whatever they are, to get a sense of the committee before moving forward, because the fact of the matter is they may not be able to open an elementary school on their own. So if the concern is about trying to save the elementary school, that they may never be able to reopen if they are required to become a supervisory district, which was the concern of the state board back in May, then I think there's some folks who might feel very differently today about where we are. I can't say for sure, haven't heard any grumbling other than people who know where I stand and so are coming to me, but anyway. I just wanted to.
Victoria?
I was just gonna say, if you're taking temperature of the board, that I agree with both Lauren and Mary Heather in terms of the guardrails, keeping of the, not making the changes. And then I also agree that to expedite the conversation, it would be fair to let Ripton know that this is where we stand, so that they know where their starting point is.
Great. Any other comments? Mary Heather?
I just want to bring up the other element that I noticed from the state board recording was that, there was sort of reference to the just in the county and other, other communities feeling the same way, and that Ripton was kind of in a wait and see pattern to see what was happening with that. I'm wondering if either of you guys could comment on how that influences this conversation.
In a very factual way, I think that is one of the underlying reasons why no matter what happens, that's going to be delayed for a year. And so I think it was fair to say that timing then provides, albeit not a lot of certainty, it does provide some insight into what's happening with other school districts. That also being said, that's not, like, I hope folks aren't hanging their hats on that as a solution, because the complexities of those towns creating supervisory union doesn't make any of this go away. And so I worry that there's, we don't want to create another false hope by putting too much weight on that. And that's my interpretation or opinion.
Are you talking about Lincoln and,
Yes.
okay,
Yeah.
just to make sure I'm on the right page.
Yeah, I mean, right now, it's, Lincoln is going out for the vote in the other 4 towns. I don't know what's happening with Addison.
I think they've voted yet.
They haven't, okay, it's soon.
It's coming up though, isn't it?
I think it is.
I think it's pretty soon, yeah.
The revote.
The revote.
Yeah, revote.
Revote, yeah.
In Starksboro.
In Starksboro.
Yeah.
So, there's a lot of fluidity to that
Yeah.
process as well. So, what I hear from the board, Peter, I think is, if you could, let's just, reach out to them and say, just, could you let us know, what you have done to understand the intentions of your community, so that we can meet what the state board has asked us to do. Nothing has changed for us, and let's go from there. We're not changing what we have said in the past, there's nothing different there, but let's first get an understanding of what they're doing to get a good temperature from their community. Thanks, everyone, for that conversation. Next up, the flag policy. Mary.
Thank you. I just want to reiterate what Jen said. There's a lot on the plate of the superintendent and the entire district. So I'm hoping
It's
that,
everyone, it's not just me.
yeah, I know, everybody, but
It's
I think we need to
ours.
move forward on this, hopefully, and make some, decision tonight about it. The policy committee met a week and a half ago, no, a week ago, actually, and spent a long time looking at a number of suggestions that a number of people on the board had sent to us, which I really appreciated because it gave some clarity to it, because we were kind of almost in a stuck place. So I'm going to pass these around, and this is sort of the motion and the proposal that we came up with based on those recommendations.
To clarify, this is listed as a discussion, are we?
That is a
taking
discussion.
It is a discussion,
Okay.
we're not voting on
Okay,
anything.
you
This is
mentioned a
just
motion, so I was a little
It's our
concerned, but I
proposed-
wasn't prepared.
It's a proposal.
a proposal.
And we'll have, where we get to, we would like to make it clarity tonight as to where we're going to get to.
Okay,
And then that will be written up, that will be hopefully warned, so
okay.
Right.
that we
Thank
can
you.
vote appropriately.
Just wanted to make sure I was on the same page.
Yeah.
The flag policy too has been totally brought into with one specific flag, which we tried to separate.
Oh, this is interesting.
Well, let's start with this, and
Yeah.
we can.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mary.
Okay, so I'm gonna read what we kind of came up with as a draft. We move that the ACSD flagpoles located outside the primary entrance of any ACSD school are designated as government flagpoles. As such, the flags flown on these poles are limited to the flags of the United States of America, the state of Vermont, and the school board may choose to fly an additional flag with a supermajority vote for a limited time in acknowledgement of a significant circumstance. Such a decision will reflect the expression of the board. So basically it's saying we make the final decision as a board if we feel that the circumstance is significant, if somebody makes a proposal to us.
Or, well, if the board, it doesn't have to come from.
It doesn't, but
It
we
does not
can-
have to come from somebody else. The
Right.
board is making this decision.
The board is saying this is what we would like to support. So that's the motion we are recommending to be discussed. And I think we all recognize that the students have done a tremendous job bringing this forward for us all to have this discussion. And I'm really proud of their advocacy and their determination to keep pushing. So, I mean, I think that they've done a lot of good in at least bringing the conversation forward here. In addition to that, the policy committee requests that the board authorize us, the policy committee, to revisit the C11 policy on student expression, to look at adding other venues beyond media, because right now the policy talks about printed media, videos, that kind of thing, for student voice, the expression of student voice. And that, so we'd be able to expand their venue for where they can express themselves. And this procedure would be a policy that would fall under the realm of the administration of their school.
So let's tackle one thing at a time. First up, comments on the draft language for the flag policy. Lorraine.
So Mary, is this going to be the actual, would this be the actual motion?
Well, we're discussing that, so if there's some drafts that we need to put in it, but the basic premise is this. Yeah.
Okay, well, my question would be for a limited time, what is the limited time? Who decide, I mean, we decided that, but what is the limited time? And then in acknowledgement of the significant circumstance,
Right.
what exactly does that mean?
Well,
That could,
a procedure would have to be written from this policy that would outline some of those specifics.
we don't normally write the procedure though.
But this would be a board policy. It's my understanding it's a board policy that we write the procedure, but it could.
Are we talking about the second part here?
No, the first part.
Yeah, the board doesn't normally write the procedures, do they, Peter? Once we set a policy, doesn't the administration write the
I mean, I think this procedure,
Is it?
given this language, it would just be a conversation here, that would be meted out in a conversation to say, for this much time, starting on this date and ending on this date. Like, I don't think you would write a separate procedure for this. I think it would just be.
It would just be part of the
The board has the
conversation.
right to do this and may do this from time to time based on these things. And then if something came up in 6 years, 10 years today, the board would talk about it and determine those, like, they would figure out those things just in the deliberation of the board meeting.
Okay.
Mary Heather.
So, I'm just kind of off the cuff, I guess the advantage of such an approach here is that if we want to flag an additional flag, currently it's the ID flag, but if we wanted to take a particular stand and flag an additional flag, it's just a board decision, we have ownership over it, and that removes the sort of element of giving that authority away.
Right.
One question for you is that, are these intended to be a 1-2 punch, or are we just deciding on one standalone and not two? I'm just wondering what the intent with the policy committee is.
Well, the intent is we wanted them to be separate, the one that this is the school flagpole is up to the board to decide what goes up. The second piece is it's addressing the students' interest in being able to express themselves in ways outside of what I see as somewhat limited by the school media and what our policy committee felt was limited. It gives them more ownership of ways that they can express themselves.
Okay, so just to
So it's separate. We just feel it's like a follow-up to.
Right. So I guess I want to kind of go through the exercise of what, like the letter to the board from Fairleos and on behalf of SCORE, how that request, that refined request would flow through this, right? So if we're saying no, we make the decision, but if they want to put up another flagpole or some other display sign elsewhere, this would be a possibility. I guess I'm just kind of wanting to go through the exercise, and therefore any student group would be able to do the same.
Right.
Well, and the procedure for that second part which you're referencing, would be determined by the school
And it
administration
would not have to go through.
and would
school
not
board.
go through the
No, it
board.
has to
So
go
the
through us.
school administration would be responsible, as they are now, for
Student conduct.
for student conduct and student, and measuring and managing student expression.
So can I
Yes.
speak to the second part here? So one of the things, just in terms of thinking about student voice and kind of statute and case law, there is already, I mean, the reason why C11 is not broad is because the other parts of student expression are rights that
Guaranteed.
students hold. Yeah, they're guaranteed rights, which is kind of what brought on this conversation as a whole in the first place around the flag policy, because students do have those rights. And when you open it up to students to be able to have control of that process, then you can't say these students can, and you're not going to allow voice for these other students. So there already are, like, within our country and within education, those are already rights that students have. So I'm not, I think in thinking through C11 and changing it, and that's a required policy.
It is.
It almost feels more like wanting to make a statement as a board about what the board believes regarding student voice, not necessarily a policy that's going to reiterate some of, probably wouldn't contain everything, but some of what's already in place that is afforded students, as their rights within the school system.
Well, part of the challenge, I think, though, is, my bet is the term media is dated, as some policy language is.
Yeah.
And so has there been a new definition of the term media, or has that been clarified?
Sure.
Because I bet, again, this is conjecture, but that this is written in a time where the media was the student newspaper.
For sure.
Yeah,
Right.
and so I think that has,
Right.
maybe kind of eclipsed that, and now so maybe that's the issue, is that, are we just making sure that the term media is the appropriate term?
Yeah.
Next.
I guess, I'm stuck on the part that says a limited time, because if the board decides that there is precedent to put up a new flag, does it have to be for a limited time? Would the language in this policy say that it is only capable, the board is only capable of putting up that flag for a limited time, or is it, if the board decides that they want to put it up to the foreseeable future, is that also possible?
Yeah,
under
the
this
board can
policy?
make that
This
decision.
board can make that decision.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think what's important here, though, in my understanding from a time perspective, is that the concept of it being unlimited would not be appropriate.
Right.
So therefore, if it's not that, it has to be the opposite of it.
Right, okay. I mean, frankly, I keep hearing people saying that they support student voice, and what I'm seeing is a negation of that. And I think I fully respect the fact that this is a very difficult thing to write policy on, but if we want to say that it's not about the flag and that it's essentially, it's not about the specific flag that's supposed to be, or that the students are petitioning to be put up, and it's about student voice, then I don't see how this policy makes sense for that. Because it is officially, it's taking away students' say about what goes up on the flagpole, and it's giving it entirely to the adults on the board. And maybe people think that that's a better choice, but I honestly see it as students just not being involved in that procedure.
I want to respectfully respond to that. So much of this discussion has been about specifically the Black Lives Matter flag and why that flag should stand over the school district. Not because the students want it and we want to say that the students want it, but because we as a district want it. And so there is nuance to that statement. And to say that this doesn't the concrete issue here is ensuring that we are providing avenue for student voice. That is a different argument than the concrete issue being that the Black Lives Matter flag has a place at the ACSD. And so I do appreciate the importance that we have to give to student voice. And as I've shared in the past, throughout this process, I have been so impressed and honored to be part of witnessing the power of student voice. But that doesn't mean that what we're trying to accomplish here with regards to making sure that at all times this school district has an avenue to make appropriate statements, that's also important. Barbara.
Yeah, it's tough, you know, because I think at the last board meeting, I was like the one that said, well, it should be a board decision, you know, we should just decide to fly the flag. But if in the event that we, as a board, decide we don't have a supermajority vote, we don't fly the flag. And so in that particular case, even though the students had really wanted it, you know, we failed. I think the students. So I would
have failed, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. And so I struggle with that.
Yeah.
I'm just being honest. I struggle with that.
I guess my response to that is I have confidence in the folks that get elected to this board that we won't fail.
Okay.
I do. Lorraine, Lindsay.
So I'm on the policy committee with Mary and Suzanne, and this is a discussion that, you know, we've weighed every nuance we possibly can, and there's different ways that you can kind of separate out what the issues are, and different ways that people define, you know, so the flagpole being, you know, a government flagpole, even if it were the student's voice, it's still a government flagpole. And ultimately, we're responsible. And so one of the exercises that I have to keep kind of going through my head is taking the Black Lives Matter flag out of my brain completely, that, you know, 10 years from now, this board becomes dominated by conservative thinkers and they want to fly a flag that is perhaps, you know, there's a strong group of conservative students that want it, but you could pick any divisive issue, but this has to be something that stands up in the future when the board has a different composition. And so it's been, from where I started on this issue to where I am today, it's like gone in such a spiral, you know? And so one of the things, the whole, you know, the last sentence, such a decision will reflect the expression of the board. That doesn't mean that we cannot get ideas from other places, but it means that it has to reflect the expression of the board. So if 10 years from now, it's all really left or really right, you know, that it, you know, somehow it's not going to be, you know, a flag on the pole that offends a great majority of the student body. The other thing about the, you know, the limited time, you know, that there's always going to be something else coming. There's always going to be another current event or something that happens that, and we actually talked about the IB flag. How did that flag get up there? And I feel that that should be put in the same category because we are affiliated with a lot of other educational groups. And so how would we get a flag such as that? One of the ways that we ended up kind of thinking about this is, well, one of the basic decisions is, do we have 2 flags on that pole or do we have 3 flags on that pole, or 4 or 5 or 6? And so it could be a decision that there are only ever 2 flags on that pole, period. That's it. If we want something representing IB, you can put some pretty banner in the hallway or Black Lives Matter and paint, you know, paint the whole parking lot. But to me, that's one of the things is, you know, do we just have 2 or do we have 3? And then the other third option that has come up is having another pole. And then that becomes who owns the pole. If there is a third pole, if a group of veterans comes onto the campus, they might perceive a second pole as being the same as the first pole, but ultimately, if there is another pole, you know, how is that managed? And acknowledging that there are people in our community for whom, you know, the flagpole is a very significant veterans groups, for example, or the offspring, loved ones of veterans who really treasure that symbol as like, this really should only have one flag on it or two flags on it. So, you know, but we keep going back to the idea of student expression. And I personally, I don't like the idea of saying we can only ever have two flags, because then even if we have a robust discussion about a third flag and they say, no, we're not having a third flag, like, I don't like the idea of shutting down that conversation, because I feel like a lot has been accomplished just by the amount of air time this has gotten in the past almost 2 years. So, you know, every word of this has gone back and forth. So.
Amy, and then Mary Heather, then Jen.
I'm wondering about, the word circumstance is so, circumspect. That, I mean, and to the point about 10 years from now and people with, I mean, I think if we could say that reflects the educational mission and values of the district, that gives us, talk about guideposts, and then it's not subject to the same wavering. I mean, sure, if, you know, whatever. It doesn't make it impossible, but it certainly makes it less likely and gives it more importance to say, we're making a statement about what we believe, and we're flying it as those statements. And I guess, Nargis, to your point, I never view this as a student rights, student voice issue. I always viewed it as the students asking us to take a stand. Mm-hmm. And that as Superintendent Burrows said, there are already mechanisms for student voice, and if we want to talk about another flag or amending that policy that makes it more possible for students to express themselves in ways that you don't feel you currently have, I support that too, and I like the idea of having us making a statement. But I guess in my mind, this whole time was a conversation about us taking a stand and saying, by us willing to say on government, what we're considering government designated speech, that we stand for this, that's about one of the most powerful things we can do symbolically, not obviously operationally and otherwise. But so I don't know if that helps or not, but I would strongly recommend that we come up with some language that helps tie it to the law.
Okay, that's helpful.
I'm gonna go to Jen and then Mary Heather, okay? Jen?
Okay, so one of my pieces does kind of follow up with what Amy was just saying, where I feel like part of our discussion was, we didn't feel like it was enough just to raise a flag, that there was more education in creating that sense of belonging within the school. And so I was wondering if there was some room for, you know, suggested additional guidance with, if we're going to fly this flag, what do we really mean by this? What are we really asking, or what are we really trying to say that we believe in?
Do you mean, just a clarifying question, this flag or any flag?
I'm saying any flag.
Okay,
so for this
yeah.
one in particular, we've talked about some specific.
Right. But any flag.
But yeah, say we want whatever. I don't want to guess what it could be
right.
next. But yeah, but just sort of some context. Is there some possibility that we, whether it's already in there and we can just do it on our own if we decide to fly a flag, or if we wanted to state, you know, that we may provide some additional context. And one just small piece, this flag has been requested by a particular school. We have flagpoles at each of our schools, and so this is for wording within here, it says to fly an additional flag, and I just inserted at one or more schools, because I think important to clarify, if we're saying we should fly this flag, do we mean we should fly it at every single school? Or based at one particular school that may be feeling like this is something that, you know, is important to them? Or do we feel like if it's important to one, it's important to all? I don't know. I just wanted to kind of put that piece in there so that we're sure of what we're saying there.
Yeah, okay.
So add that explicitly. Yeah.
That's my suggestion, but I don't feel strongly either way. I just felt like that was vague and could lead to confusion.
Mary Heather.
Yeah, I guess I want to sort of echo what Amy said. I too have been operating under the assumption that this ask was not just about student expression, but that this ask was about students asking the leaders of the district to take a stand in support of this particular flag. And in the conversations that we've had so far, there's been a lot of concern, particularly around the flagpole, as sort of government speak, but also acknowledging, as Lindsay mentioned, you know, the importance of this flagpole and the American flag to many members of our community, particularly veterans groups and those who serve. And I think in some ways we're getting close to a potential compromise where we can acknowledge and preserve that flag for American flag and state flag, but perhaps we could consider, you know, a second flagpole that still is under the authority of the board, where you know, we as a board can decide to fly an additional flag. Perhaps that's where the IB flag should go, and an additional flag with the guideposts that Amy mentioned, you know, something in support of the ACSD's mission, but also perhaps even further narrowing, you know, kind of in acknowledgement or in support of historically marginalized communities. So that it's not, I mean, this is the other thing, everybody's been saying, well, we can't do it, it's political. And I have such discomfort with that because, you know, I think this idea of separating political from educational is just not true. It's not historically accurate. And I feel like, you know, any historically marginalized group that stands up to claim their American rights, their human rights, is in fact a political statement, and it happens every day. And the response, or lack thereof, is a political statement. And so I feel like the inaction of this board so far is a political statement. And the actions, whatever this board decides, will be. And so this idea that it's, you know, it should be separate, I have a hard time wrapping my brain around that. And this idea that we should keep it separate, I think it makes me think of like Martin Luther King Jr.'s letters from a Birmingham jail, where he's talking about, you know, white moderates and preferring, you know, peace and calm over, you know, civil disobedience, trying to strive towards justice. So I feel like we as a board have a responsibility to rise to the occasion that our students have presented in front of us. And I think we're close. I really think we're capable of doing this. And I feel like, to me, the opportunity is that, you know, yes, maybe we preserve that main flagpole, the one that's statutorily required in front of every school. Maybe that needs to just remain as it is. But maybe we as a board need to either put up another flagpole or put up some other way of prominently displaying our support for Black Lives Matter. And, you know, I personally feel like it is something that we supposedly espouse in our curriculum by adhering to, you know, the IB curriculum. And, you know, I guess I would like to see us follow through with that, with the formal decision. So I don't know if that clarifies or muddies the water, but I feel like we're close to.
Muddied it a little bit.
All right, so any other, yes, Margaret?
I just have two things. One, I have a quick, question. What would a supermajority be in the school board? Would that be
10.
10 of 13.
10 of 13, great.
Thanks. And secondly, in, I guess, I agreed with a lot of points in Noble's points there, and I just, if we're talking about students asking for the board to take a stance, I think one of the reasons I'm so hesitant about this is because frankly I've seen enough hesitation that I'm not sure it would be a stance that the students are supporting currently. And
could you clarify that?
If we're speaking frankly about the Black Lives Matter flag, about the petition,
right.
I've heard enough people be hesitant about the fact about whether Black Lives Matter is a political flag that we shouldn't be making a statement on, that I think you spoke to your faith that the board would make the right decision, and frankly, I think a lot of students at the school don't have that faith, because we haven't heard anything from the board surrounding these kinds of issues. And in relation to the Black Lives Matter flag, and some of the comments, if you guys can remember them, about that Professor Stoll made, about how he felt that putting this flag up in capital letters is a political statement. He spoke about Porter Hospital. In relation to that comment, I would like to say there is a very long history of medical institutions being extremely institutionally racist towards our African American communities in the US, if some of you are familiar with the Tuskegee experiments. And I would also like to say that there's an extremely long history of institutionalized racism in our schools. And I think Vermont's, because we are such a white, frankly, state, we haven't exactly come to reckoning with the past that we have, because there hasn't been much of a past, as there haven't been a lot of people of color living here historically, at least until colonizers taken over the land that we currently live on. And I frankly, as a student of color in this school system, I have been insulted about my name. I have been insulted about my parents' accents. I have been insulted over the fact that I speak more than one language. I have been insulted over the country I come from. I have been insulted about my religion. And frankly, I feel that some people it's very easy for them to remove themselves from the conversation because of their lived experiences not being those of a person of color in this state. And I think it's so important for, even if it's just a statement saying, hey, if this is passed, we want to affirm to the students that Black Lives Matter is something we support, or something like that, because to be honest, that, one of the commenters said, that flag is a symbol of safety for so many of us. That I can walk into that school and know that if I experience something that is racist, I can go and say something, and the likelihood is that my comments will be taken seriously. And I think the reason I was a little hesitant about this is because, to be honest, a lot of students of color, especially, are unsure, because when we look at majority white institutions, not a lot of trust and trust in decisions comes to mind. So I just want to remind the board of that, and in that you cannot guarantee that everyone will think. I now that you all have clarified about this particular motion, I honestly think it's a good kind of middle ground, but I just want to make sure that you don't all think, the community immediately knows that you will make the right decision, because a lot of people hear, oh, the board will make a decision, and they get a little nervous. especially the students, because they're not sure that their voices are gonna be listened to in terms of that decision.
And I appreciate those comments. You know, my dad always used to say to me growing up, mostly in the context of sports, Mary, demonstrate, don't declare. You just beat that like all the time, demonstrate, don't declare. And I think we as the board have a responsibility to always demonstrate, not declare. And this process, I think has been a process of action, to be quite honest. I do believe that. It has been long and arduous and difficult for everybody to weed through some of this, and a learning process for all of us, and we have to give space for that. But I do believe we are going to be able to demonstrate that we not only want to fly this flag, but we want to make sure that you don't have those experiences. Right. More importantly so. Absolutely. That you don't have those experiences. And the fact that you're having them without that flag flying, I don't think us flying it is going to solve it immediately, to be quite honest. And we have a lot of work to do. But I hope, Mary, now you have kind of enough.
Well, I guess I'm trying, there's still not a lot of.
Well, I think.
I got Amy's suggestion about including something about the educational mission and our values as being part of the, instead of circumstances.
Yep.
Mary Heather's remark regarding this, us as a board entertaining the idea of a second flagpole.
Can I just bring clarity to that though?
Yeah.
Because I think that one,
Yeah.
I think if, again, this is my opinion, if we can get to, as a board, to vote and hopefully with great, I can never say that word, unanimity, that we can fly on the government flagpole, a flag that would fit this description, rather than having to add a new flagpole. I personally would love to see us get there. The nuance between any and all school districts, or any and all schools within the district, I think we can get there with another comma and some language. I don't think that that's difficult. And I think getting us to a point where we put a little bit more color on the concept of circumstance, that it is a situation in which we believe we need to reinforce and demonstrate our district values in a way that is prominent.
Write that down.
Demonstrate our
district values in a way that is prominent and then understood, which we could then follow up with why we are doing it.
Yeah.
Could be something that we all, obviously, with, with a vote, could lean into.
So using some of those words in there instead of just circumstance. Okay.
Yes.
Any other comments? Oh, Victoria, then Lorraine, then Lindsay. And then I really, if I'm gonna be doing my job and not getting a bad grade at the end of this meeting, we have other stuff that we have to.
I just want to clarify then on Mary Heather's comments on the 1 versus 2, and maybe it would be helpful to have a show of hands as to if people are comfortable with this as it stands with the one flagpole versus 2.
This doesn't say that. This says that we have flagpoles outside. It doesn't say how many or what they have to be on. I think that's up to how, whatever the.
Well, each school is
That's
different.
just for each school.
Schools are operational, so like, we're not gonna insist that each elementary school puts up a second flagpole.
Well, that's what I'm saying is,
The high school already has 3.
Mary Heather's comments, I felt like she was saying the preferred solution would be to have 2 flagpoles. I don't necessarily see that, but I didn't know if other people felt that that was the preferred solution and that maybe we should get beyond having 1 flagpole versus 2 flagpoles.
From a nod of heads, we're looking at 1 flagpole.
Yeah, that's,
Right.
yeah, that was the intention, was to
Yeah.
focus on the first flagpole at hand.
Let the next
And then
one go
let-
with another
Let
flagpole.
students decide.
Well, it totally says
Through their
poles,
expression.
plural.
That was like,
Well, that's because
That's
there are
multiple
polls out
schools.
there.
At every
Multiple
school.
Schools, not polls.
That
for-
any school.
Yeah.
located, the flagpole's located outside the primary entrance
Above every
of
school.
any school.
Okay.
Yes, Lindsay, and then Betty.
So we tried to stay away from this, but this brings up a really good point that there are multiple flagpoles already on some properties. And we tried to just like not really, get mired down in that, but I do think you raise a good point about that, it came up about the flagpole at the football field.
But this is the one that says designated as a government flagpole.
Designated as the government
And this is
flagpole.
the primary
Yeah.
Right.
flagpole.
And so I guess one of the things, I don't know if the policy committee would deal with it, but in what way is it designated? If we look at this, if we do
We'll
a
ask,
flag.
how about we say, we'll ask each school to designate their government flagpole.
Okay, yeah, because this is something, we don't wanna,
Yeah.
the intention was not to be policing every
Right.
single flagpole at every single school.
Because then they're gonna start popping up everywhere.
Yeah, well, and the second and very separate, the third and fourth paragraph here is meant to be separate.
Yeah.
Let's
just,
and the
right now,
other
let's just deal
flagpoles
with
are,
that.
so but it's good to clarify that so that we're not messing with the other
Betty and
flagpoles.
then Lorraine, you have Betty, then Lorraine. Okay.
So I had a few questions, but also some comments. In the event that we have more than one additional flag that, say, students want to fly, what happens then?
This is not that a student wants to fly, that the board wants to make an
Oh, sorry,
expression.
okay, that the board wants, so, because I see here that it kind of limits it to 3 flags, according to this wording. But let's say, there's already a Black Lives Matter flag there, and, the United States and the state of Vermont. What if, say another flag, they wanted to fly another flag? Would that be a possibility?
The board would have to vote on it.
Okay, but does that language reflect that?
Yes.
It would mean that the Black Lives Matter flag one of the flags has to not be there,
It
right?
doesn't say that. The board would have to vote on that.
Yeah.
This is 8 flags.
Because it.
And additional flag.
And additional flag.
So it could say additional
You
flags.
could say G with parens S.
Right, yeah,
Parens.
Okay.
Good point though.
Yeah.
We appreciate, believe me, the policy.
Yeah, I can only.
No, it's just.
Lorraine,
And
oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Just to clarify that this is just a policy for flying flags and not specifically addressing, the Black Lives Matter flag, just because we need to have something in place.
Right, and then it gives us an avenue
Right.
to do what the board would do next,
Yeah.
which I have
If we
confidence
have
that
to-
this will do.
If this passes, we'd have to make a motion to basically
Fly the Black
fly the
Lives-
Black Lives Matter flag for a period of time and have it come to a vote.
Right, and it doesn't have to be, like, my original idea. It could be an idea that I gather as a board member who's been listening to feedback from the community.
Right.
The board member, but it's an
Yeah.
expression
It's
of
an
the board.
expression, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Lorraine,
Is Betty done?
yeah. Oh, and are you done? I'm sorry.
She had questions and comments, I thought.
I'm gonna finish this by being, I guess, the one in the minority here, and I'll start off by saying, first, I feel terrible that our student board members had to deal with any of the things we had to deal with. And when we took the initial vote, we had a split vote because one person was missing that night, and afterward, I was like, I kind of wish I voted the other way, if I had just been in discussion. And the more I hear about it, I'm at the point now, I definitely don't feel like we should have any additional flags on the government flagpole, and I don't think we should have any additional poles, period. I completely support Black Lives Matter, however, it's not about that flag supposedly, and I just think this whole flag issue is distorting things that we should be focusing on, like within the building, as opposed to a flag flying above. And so I'm not gonna probably vote to support anything that has to do with additional flags.
Okay. comment.
Can I just ask one clarification of Narges? At one point, I thought you had said, and I could just be confusing it, that even more so than flying the Black Lives Matter flag, you would like the board to issue a statement in support of Black Lives Matter. Did I hear you correctly? And if so, I feel like some of us could put that on the agenda for next board meeting, and we could get that taken care of. That's easier than the flag, to tell you the truth, if that's what you're asking for.
I'm probably not even more than the flag, but just addressing the fact that it's not a done deal even when this motion is passed.
Right.
And I think a lot of community members might have anxiety about that, because this essentially was what, the reason we need this is because of the motion that was brought up about the Black Lives Matter flag. And I think something to address that with the community, because I think when a lot of community members hear that it's just gonna be a supermajority board vote, they feel that, well, right, like it could go either way.
And by the community, you mean the school community, not the public community. Or both.
I mean, both, either. But yeah, I think a lot of students, I mean, they'll probably hear this and be like, all right, well, it's a start, there's a policy, but we're gonna have to, right? So there's like a continuation of that same, like, convincing people that this is a flag that needs to be there and is in support of students. And so I just think that, like, I know some people, like, people on the board might think, well, like, you know, I think we have enough for this, like a super majority, so it's like, you know, it's a done deal, this will probably happen. I don't think community members feel that, so maybe something to address that, but otherwise, yeah, I think I do.
So, okay, so I can follow up with some other board members about that after the fact, if that is what I heard you say. Thank you.
Right.
I mean, that's
Okay.
something that I think we can do a lot easier.
All right, Mary, how, do you think you have what you need?
I hope so.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mary.
Really, it makes you wanna go back to being the school nurse.
I think that'd be easier.
Even during a pandemic.
Okay.
No, it just, in terms of the follow-up on this, are we then expecting?
We're gonna expect a
for the next
motion
board meeting
for
that
action.
it will be warned?
It will be warned, and we will have an action
Thank
next
you.
board meeting.
Okay. Can we also do, at that time, something about why we're supporting,
Well,
or
this,
that we
this
are
one's
gonna support
different.
Black Lives
This is, so that's different, because that would be for the flag vote,
Right.
which is after we have a flag
Right.
policy.
But-
I will work with a couple of board members to ask to put a new motion on the agenda for the next meeting.
Okay.
Great.
Okay,
Perfect.
I just don't want that to get lost.
I won't lose it, Mary. I got it very securely right here.
Okay.
Okay.
Next up on the agenda, again, everyone, thank you very much for the depth of that discussion, really good.
Mary C., it's
guys,
Suzanne.
I looked up
And I just have a point of clarification. The next policy committee meeting, we meet on the third Wednesday of every month. So we would not have something for you on the 12th. We would have something for the board. Well, I'm saying the 12th because the 11th is in some people's world a holiday.
This is just a couple of tweaks, like, do we need,
I don't think I mean, it sounds like the policy committee's got, I mean, it's just making the changes to
Making the changes
this.
to
Right,
I don't know
right.
if it needs to-
right?
And Suzanne, I think we did talk about adding on the 6th.
Yeah,
of
4 to
October.
5:30 on the 6th, so that it'd be ready for the next.
So,
meeting.
because we knew that this was going to be a short turnaround.
That's right. Okay.
We need to warn this 10 days ahead.
Okay.
So the 6th doesn't, if there are changes that are made on the 6th,
Is that
we
enough
can't
time?
warn it on the 6th. We have to warn it, we'll
Okay.
warn it this week.
This week,
Yeah.
Can we just figure out a way to get
Yeah,
whatever we need
we'll
to
get
get
it.
done?
we'll do it.
Okay, great.
Great.
Perfect. Now on to board meeting locations.
So, given just the complexity of where things are with our buildings and things aren't necessarily changing in terms of visitors, volunteers, things like that, it makes more sense for us to keep the meetings here at 208 and not try to visit other schools. I did tell the principals that will continue to ask them to come. So our next one is going to be Mary Hogan in October. The next meeting, we'll have Jen and a presentation from Jen and probably some other folks from Mary Hogan as well. And then we can, I think we can revisit if our guidance changes and we can open up our schools more. There are lots of, as you all know, every school is a little bit different, and having this many people in some of the spaces is challenging, and just kind of given everything that we're juggling right now, I think it's better to stay simple and stay here.
Chip.
Some of the purposes of those other schools was the students' presentations, if they were in person, at least as we used to do it, which you can't do. So I agree with you totally that makes tons of sense to me. So.
Barbara.
Yeah, I agree too. And I think if in fact we get the vaccine from 5 to 11, then we could readdress this, and we have a lot of kiddos that have been vaccinated. Then we can probably invite parents and, have it a little more normal.
Yeah.
I think would be all big to the
I mean, the fact of the matter is, though, it's a public meeting.
Yeah.
So it's not just about having the parents there.
Yeah.
It's
everyone. I agree.
So I think that's the concern, though, is that we can't go into a school because we can't necessarily bring
Those
in
visitors can't be
50
there.
people from the public into a public school right now with COVID restrictions,
Oh, I know.
whether the students are vaccinated or not. That's what concern I'm hearing, correct?
Yeah.
It's more about the space
It's
and bringing
twofold, yeah,
visitors
it's both.
in.
I mean, we have a number of students that are vaccinated, and we're not allowing the public into our school buildings. That's why because this is a satellite, it is better in that way.
All right, great, that's a good decision. Betty.
Will we still get to hear, to have student presentations anyway, like the electronically, just so we don't lose that piece of it?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think students could come here too.
Yeah.
Because I'm thinking about, students from Bridgeport, sure, that, may not be able to come because of.
We can do Zoom if they want to come into Middlebury, they can do that too, so. we'll be
I mean, we had some great presentations last year.
Yeah, and I think for the next few months, again, being as flexible as we can is really our only solution right now. Okay. This is exciting. The action on the VEHI visit annual meeting and proxy votes. Nice little packet with stickies. So in the past, how this has worked, we don't go to these gatherings. We provide our proxy to the organization for them to vote. We just need a motion to provide our votes to the proxies at these meetings. And so the first one, do we have to do these separately or do we do them combined? I forget.
They're separate, but
Okay.
you could probably lump them together.
All right, so I need a motion. I need a motion for us to assign to sign the proxy certificate to provide our proxy vote to VEHI and VSBIT in support of their annual meeting votes.
So moved.
Second. Any further discussion?
No.
All in favor? Aye. Suzanne?
Can you tell me who made the motion and who seconded it?
Ben made the motion, and Victoria seconded it.
We're happy to just get this going.
And all those in favor are eyeing it right now. Any opposed? So moved. Great.
Thank you.
Your pleasure. I have no announcements with regards to change in the topic or agenda or updates and other. We do have an executive session, however. So
Mary, may I ask one quick question that somebody asked me?
Sure.
Someone in the community asked me, because, well, they had heard that the white tents that were bought so students could be outside last year, they heard that some were down and they were wondering where the white tents had gone.
Can we find out?
They've survived in some places and they were destroyed and others.
Wind and weather.
Wind kind of took them to pieces. They were up all winter. And some of the sides were gone. Some still have the roof on them, and schools are using the roof without the sides. So they're in various states of repair or disrepair, and we're continuing to use them. At the same time, it's not a real great investment because the same thing's going to keep happening. We are using them, and it's very expensive to set them up and take them down. So I think right now we're in a process of just using them, the ones that have survived, and then, we'll probably revisit this post-COVID to determine, is there some kind of permanent solution we would want, which probably wouldn't be one of these tents. It would be something that could withstand winter.
Right. It was just something that someone had asked me, and so I said I would ask.
Great.
Mary,
Yes, Victoria.
don't shoot.
I'm not, I'm just
Okay.
happy little camper. What do you got?
I've got another.
Okay.
So, Mary Heather and Peter and I were talking today about facilities master plan and specifically communication to go out to the public on sort of where we're at. And so I just wanted to get the temperature of the board so that we can direct the communications committee on creating some sort of like memorandum of update or something. So the idea would be that we sort of just almost go through what we talked about at the retreat and at the last meeting in terms of explaining the unknowns in the environment around us, why we have all these unknown factors, talk about the challenges that aren't going away, and that basically state that although the timeline's uncertain, we know that when the new funding structure and its ramifications are understood, we will continue to move forward on consolidation, and that sort of the waiting period is going to allow us to benefit from the equity and strategic plan, and so that when it does come time to making choices, we'll be better informed. But that in the meantime, we'll be investing in our secondary schools, and then sort of go on to explain sort of what we're using our ESSER funds for, talk about
So this is a short memo.
and sort of how we're gonna wrap up the facilities master plan. It's gonna be really short, concise.
Yeah.
That's good, that's her job.
Yeah. The idea is we want,
So there's a bunch of stuff that we're trying to communicate.
Yeah, we just want to communicate sort of where we are. We don't want everybody to be like, okay, well, they said they were gonna come back with the facilities master plan and we haven't heard anything. So we want to just give like a status update. And then we want the board's permission to sort of have the communications committee begin
Drafting that.
In conjunction with the facility.
Yeah.
Lorraine.
So is there gonna be any kind of timeline put into this message, or just that we currently not looking to do anything at the moment, but that?
I think we'll talk about, in terms of just timeline, we'll talk about when we think we might have more information from the state. I don't think that we will say in 4 years, we're gonna consolidate into 4 schools, no.
Okay, well, I got in on the middle of your facilities meeting, and I heard something about 3 to 5 years, which I wasn't sure whether you were saying you weren't gonna do anything for 3 to 5 years, or you were.
No, that was, Peter was sort of estimating when, we might have the information from the waiting study, and.
I think that was more 2 years, not 3 to 5.
Okay.
So if we happen to hear in 6 months the information that we think we need, we go ahead, or?
Right, we're not gonna, yes.
Okay, I
It's
just
sort
don't
of,
want
that was just an estimate as to when we think that we will have sort of an understanding of what's replacing the threshold, and how the waiting study is gonna impact us. So if that were to happen tomorrow, then we jump in the.
Jen.
I feel like this is a bigger discussion than just a quick, long memo. That I think the board doesn't really know where we are right now. I think that we have some things that we've talked about, but I don't believe that we have a decision on what we need to do. And I thought the facilities committee is actually going to come to the board to talk about that and talk about where we think we are and what we think we're going to do. And I think before we send out a memo, I think we need as a board to get all together and figure out where we are and where we're going. And I don't think that's an other right now.
Right, I wholeheartedly agree with that statement. But as part of this process though, then is a good solution to have them start to codify this language in memo form, then bring this as they currently understand it to us as a board to A, talk about it, C, bring clarity to it, and then once that happens, we'll be ready to go with communicating that to the public. Does that sound?
And some of it, we're not saying we're gonna present how we feel about school choice, but rather that we're going to discuss, that's one of the things that's still in the work.
We just haven't made a plan yet on how that's happening, so I'm just not comfortable with saying, yes, go ahead and make a statement when we don't even know what we're actually agreeing on yet, of where we are and what we're stopping and what we're doing, and how that's gonna look more formally. So I would just like to extend that conversation to later, and so if you want to try to formulate in a summary form where we are, that we can then feed off of, great, it probably would help our discussion, but I think that should be on the agenda for whenever you feel like you have that document ready.
Perfect.
Thanks.
Yes. Is there a way to tie in the district's strategic plan to work on equity? Did you say that?
Yeah,
she did.
She did.
Okay, I'm sorry.
Yep. All good. It's late, I totally get it.
I'm sorry.
Yes, Lindsay.
I have another item that I would like to possibly see on the next agenda that, I don't really know the right way to put.
If this is an agenda request, you can just send it to me and then we can go back and forth on it.
Well, I don't know if it's an agenda request or if it's something that's more at the superintendent's office level. But I would really like to get information about the challenges with the 6th grade move in the middle school. I've heard a couple of public comments and I've also seen, would that be
that would
for
be
us?
Yeah, no,
Or
we'll chat about that and then
Okay.
we'll look to get that on.
Okay, yeah,
agenda.
information gathering, how we can support from the board level, if there's anything we can do. Yeah, so.
Perfect.
I was gonna bring that up. Thank you.
Okay.
I forgot.
Any others? Great. Could I get a motion to go into executive session?
For the purpose of what, Mary?
Superintendent's evaluation and ACSB negotiations update.
Thank you.
Moved by Lorraine, second. All those in favor? Aye, and opposed? We are now formally in executive session.